Welcome back to another episode of I'll Allow It Nevada, your go-to podcast for insightful glimpses into the Nevada judiciary. I'm your host, Seth Easley, representing the Supreme Court of Nevada, Administrative Office of the Courts. Today we have an exciting episode for our audience. We are discussing an innovative program that is making a real impact in the Reno community, Community Court. To explore this specialty court, I am delighted to welcome Reno Municipal Court Chief Judge Chris Hazlett-Stevens to the studio. Thank you very much for joining us, Chief Judge.
Seth, thank you for having me. I appreciate this opportunity.
So before we really dive into the specialty court, can you perhaps provide just a brief overview of what Community Court is and what the program's goal is?
Sure. So Community Court stands as an alternative to the traditional criminal justice system in that instead of using the tools of the traditional system such as jail time, community service, fines, we connect those committing low-level, quality-of-life type misdemeanors with services to help them connect with those service providers, get on their feet, and be a contributing member of the community. And predominantly, but not exclusively, this community court serves the unhoused and unsheltered community in Reno.
Okay, so going back, can you share a little bit about what inspired the inception of this specialty court? It was established in 2019, if I'm correct. So yeah, what was the inspiration behind its inception and what challenges maybe were there?
Yeah, that's right. So in 2019, it was actually Judge Tammy Riggs, who stood community court on its feet in 2019. But here's what we were seeing as judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, is the traditional approach to working with this population was when a police officer would engage with an individual who was committing a low-level, quality-of-life type misdemeanor crime, such as trespassing, urinating in public, camping in the park, being in the park after hours, crimes like that. They would either cite that person into the Reno Municipal Court or they would arrest that person and they would wind up in jail. When judges would see those individuals, whether in jail or out of custody arraignments, they would impose sentences which really didn't do anything for that person. In other words, person is arrested, the judge would see him a few days later, the person would enter a plea to that charge, and the judge would issue typically a sentence for credit for time served, right? Because it's a low-level misdemeanor crime, and it doesn't deserve much more than that. What happens is that person would get out of custody, and guess what they would do? Inevitably, they would reoffend, of course, because we hadn't changed anything. We haven't moved the dial. We didn't do anything different for that person to pull them out of that situation of chronic homelessness so that they wouldn't reoffend. So that when they reoffended, the judges would be in consternation. Here you are again, so-and-so. We have another turn with you, and why do you keep on committing these crimes, right? The judges didn't know what to do with that. Prosecutors didn't know what to do with that. And that was the system we were stuck in for years, decades, I would say, is this cycling of a person in and out of custody or in and out of the traditional criminal justice system. Because as you might imagine, the criminal justice system really isn't built for what we're trying to do with a human being struggling with the issues of homelessness.
Right.
That was the basis, is we needed to take a different approach to what we had been doing that hadn't been working for years and years.
You mentioned that the specialty court not exclusively, but primarily works with the unhoused population. What are some of the specific challenges that this population faces, and how does specialty court address them?
Yeah, housing. Yeah, that's number one, and it's priority number one. You know, different communities take different approaches to this. And while community court is a feature of our city, it is a feature of a much broader network of individuals, groups, organizations, city and county government that is trying to work on the issue related to homelessness and on people being unsheltered. And we're trying to, as a community, provide access to housing when it's available. But imagine this. You're on the street. You're living literally on the sidewalk or in a park or by the Truckee River. That's what we have here in Reno. And then the ask is go seek employment and go get housing. But then you have to look at the barriers associated with that, right? Barrier number one is Do you have ID? How do you get ID? Well, you need a birth certificate or social security card so that you can go to the DMV to get ID. And how do you go to the DMV to go get ID when the DMV is about 15 miles away from where you're existing? Those are the barriers that I think a lot of people don't quite understand before we can even talk about, even discuss the issue of how do we put this person in some sort of sustainable housing. And even when we put that person in some sort of sustainable housing, we have to build a structure around that person so that it is sustainable, that it's not temporary, because we have to address issues of mental illness and substance use. Those are the issues that seem to plague this community and keep them stuck in the cycle of chronic homelessness. So we have to address all of these issues so that we don't just find a solution for this person and the solution falls off the rails almost immediately after we provide that solution. We have to take a full-faceted approach for this individual. That takes time. That takes providers who are willing to do that sort of work. And then it takes the opportunities of housing as well.
So community court works with providers. So how does community court support this population in reducing their recidivism?
Let me tell you how it works, because this is special. This is how it's different from traditional court. Mm-hmm. Traditional court, police officer engages with you, they issue a citation. That citation arraignment date is 30 days out, right? Mm-hmm. Or they arrest you and you go to jail and now you see a judge. Community court is completely different. When police officers engage with somebody, anybody committing this certain subset of misdemeanor crime, they cite them into community court. Community court is held at the downtown Reno library. We don't even hold it in the courthouse. We want to move away from the courthouse traditional setting. And so we hold it in the downtown Washoe County Reno library. At that library, at that setting where that person appears pursuant to that citation, there are a group of providers that are willing to provide instant access to services, because timing is everything with any population suffering from these issues, right? And if we can get that person in touch with a provider that same day, we have far better chances of reaching that person, connecting with that person, and that person complying with what we want them to do and reaching the goals that we have jointly set for that person. That's how it's different, is we don't at court say, hey, you're going to go and you're going to make an appointment with so-and-so and you're going to get treated for substance use issues and you're going to have to schedule those appointments on your own. Good luck to you. Mm-hmm. Instead, that person is at court, the provider is at court, and we connect the person with the provider, and that provider will actually, in certain scenarios, transport that person to their facility so that we can start engagement. Whether that's substance use engagement, mental health engagement, or perhaps we need an ID. We have a standing appointment at the DMV for IDs every Wednesday. So we'll drive that person to the DMV to start that initiation of the ID. That's what we have at community court, is the instantaneous delivery of services.
Wow, yeah, that's amazing. So I can only assume using the library as the venue was a strategic choice.
Absolutely, it was strategic. And this is a model of community court. So there are community courts all across the country. First community court started in Red Hook, New York, in Midtown Manhattan 30 plus years ago. And they've been popping up all across the country. Every community court will look different than every other community court because each community has a different issue to solve, different resources they have, and different individuals. And so we decided to adopt the library model of community court. So the library model takes the library as the central location, and it is in Reno, the centralized location.
Absolutely.
Where many in this population find themselves anyway, right? The downtown Reno library is a hub of resources already, whether it's because of the librarians that provide access to internet and provide access to assistance with their phones if they are able to have phones, and assist with being able to call treatment providers or whatever it is. So they were already existing there anyway. It's the centralized hub, and we started community court for that reason. But we also chose the library. I don't know if y'all know the downtown Reno library, but it's a beautiful location. So if you walk inside, it's filled floor to ceiling with trees and plants, and it's this huge atrium of beauty.
Wow.
So people come in there and there's already a sense of serenity. When you walk into the community court, it lowers everyone's blood pressure, literally, and they're much more willing to engage. People are willing to engage when they're there in this setting. That's one of the reasons we also chose that particular library in that location.
That makes sense. It feels less punitive and more like they're there to receive support.
And that's exactly the other reason is it's not meant to be punitive. It's meant to only provide support. In fact, when people arrive for community court, they're greeted with coffee, snacks, donuts. They're always provided lunch that's made by the Washoe County Jail. And we provide that as a basis. You got to feed your belly. You got to, if you like coffee, have coffee. And it settles individuals, and they know from the outset that we're not there to punish them. We're not there to take the typical criminal justice approach. We're there merely to see what we can do for that human being in front of us to connect them with a provider that might be able to start pulling them out of the situation they're in.
So community court operates with different service providers. You've talked about already kind of how that works, but do you have anything else you can add about how that works in practice, that collaboration with community service providers?
Yeah. So our providers are community court. Without our providers, we would just be a court operating in the library, right, instead of the courthouse. And so it's vital that we have our providers who are willing every single Wednesday to staff a member of their team at community court in order to deliver services. So, for example, DWSS, Department of Welfare and Social Services, they deliver a staff member that every Wednesday provides access to Medicaid. They can sign them up for Medicaid, can sign them up for SNAP benefits. That person is there. All of the Medicaid MCOs are there so that we can provide access to their person-specific Medicaid, right? Anthem's there, Health Plan of Nevada's there, Silver Summit's there, Molina's there. We have all of those individual providers who can provide access to that. We have access to substance use providers. They're there as well. Mental health providers. We have the Downtown Reno Partnership, who's part of our community court, who will provide access to IDs, Social Security cards, things of that nature, kind of the beginning steps of of a much bigger plan. So these are the types of providers that we have so that we can move a person from where they are. I stole this from a judge, so I'm going to give credit. There's another judge who says this: we'll meet you where you are, but we're not going to let you stay there, right? We have providers that can move you from where you are to a higher place, right? We'll scaffold up until we're at a place where we can agree that you're good. So those are the providers that deliver those services right there on site. In fact, another one is Nevada Legal Services. What we find is that one of the barriers to housing is eviction history and criminal history. So Nevada Legal Services provides the person's ability to clear that eviction history if it's possible, or seal that criminal history that's preventing them from access to housing. Those are the types of barriers we're talking about. Those are the initial steps before that person can even get some sort of sustainable long-term housing.
So, yeah, it sounds like people don't necessarily quite understand actually the amount and the level of barriers people in those situations need to overcome to find a facility, I guess, in housing, in which you mentioned was the biggest issue in this community. Yeah,
that, it's interesting. There's people in the community who are kind of two sides of this argument. One side is, you know what, they're not really doing anything wrong, so leave them alone, kind of thing. And then the other side of the coin is those who say, well, they're committing crimes, so, treat them like criminals. And then there's this middle path, right, that we're taking. We're taking a path of, yeah, they committed a crime based on them essentially being homeless or unsheltered. And then what do we do with that? It's an opportunity. I see this as an opportunity to engage with this person and see where we can get them from where we've met them to where we think they can be in that period of time. And that you've hit it on the head, that housing is kind of the last part of this. That doesn't mean that we don't provide access to shelter All right. The Washoe County has the CARES campus. We have our place that provides shelter for women and families. And then we have residential treatment centers. So if someone is suffering from substance use issues and they need a place to stay, then we can get them connected with a residential treatment center, Bristlecone, Crossroads, Ridge House, whatever those might be, so that we can get them sheltered. Life Changes. We actually contract with Life Changes for a bed so that we can pull someone off the street into safety while another residential treatment center is coming their way within maybe a month or 2 weeks, something like that. So I don't want you to think that, we're just going to leave them on the street. We try to pull them off into some sort of sheltered environment while we do all of what we're doing so that one day we can move them closer to housing once we have everything else taken care of, and then either proof of income through SSDI or through employment if they're employable.
So on that note, what are some key outcomes you've seen or successes you've seen in community court? And are there any stories that specifically stand out to you?
Yeah, I have two stories that stand out to me. One is from someone I met. I take walks down by the river at lunch because I enjoy it. It's just pure enjoyment. It's lovely, right? I'm out in the sunshine. I'm walking by the river. And yet there are people who are homeless and unsheltered right by the river. This one gentleman called me over. This was a few years ago, right after I started community court up in 2021 again after COVID. He called me over and asked, "Hey, are you a lawyer?" And I said, "Well, kind of, I am, but I'm a judge." And so we had this conversation. He was homeless, and he was sitting with another gentleman. He actually had a beer in his hand. He was drinking beer. That's against the law, but we had a discussion. I told him about community court. I said, "You might just have a citation, by the way, for this kind of thing." And he said, "You know what? I think I do." And I said, "Why don't you find your way to community court when you can, and we can see what we can do about that citation and see if we can help you." Lo and behold, about a month later, he shows up to community court. He did have a citation, and we started our work with him. It took time, and this does take time. Sometimes he would come to court drunk, really drunk. Sometimes, and he would have seizures in court because of his use of alcohol. And over time, by more citations for open container or sleeping in the park, whatever these citations were, over time, we built trust right from the beginning. But over time, he trusted that we had his best interests at heart. And now he is, a year and a half sober and working. He just graduated the Crossroads program. So these are the successes. Another one I had was a gentleman that came to community court, no less than 10 times, and refused to acquiesce, refused to comply with treatment. He was a severe alcoholic. And what we finally did with him is he had his last citation, I think 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago, 2.5 to 3 years ago. And he said, "This is time. It's time to do this." And I'm wanting to do this. We connected him with Life Changes, in fact. And he's been sober ever since that day. It's about 2.5 years deep into sobriety. He's now a house manager at Life Changes. That's his employment, as well as where he lives. These are the success stories we have. People come in, they might not trust us at first, but they do trust us because that's what we do. This is all relational, right? We build relationships with people so that when they come back, which they inevitably will, then they know, got it. They know what they're doing. They know that they're not here to punish me. They're here to connect with services. Those are just two of many stories we've had of people finding success, finding housing, finding resources, and getting on their feet.
That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying this episode of I'll Allow It Nevada. We're always striving to bring you valuable insights and education, not just for judicial officers, but for anyone interested in the Nevada judiciary. If you find our content helpful or intriguing, please share your experience with your friends, family, and colleagues. Your support helps us reach a broader audience and ensures that more people can benefit from our discussions. Thank you for listening and supporting I'll Allow It Nevada. So let's shift gears a little bit. What are some challenges facing community court?
Yeah, so there are challenges. Some of them we've overcome. One of the original challenges, and it kind of came up over time, is police willing to cite into community court. You can imagine, police are criminal justice, instruments of criminal justice, right? And they see their role, this way they see their role of someone committing a crime, they need to be arrested or taken into court legitimately. There's no judgment about that. It's just kind of the way they're fixed, right? And so I think there was some hesitation about, instead of citing them into the Reno Municipal, how about we cite them into the downtown Reno Library? Imagine the resistance, imagine the hesitation, and yet they did it. Mm-hmm. They were willing, and now we have a robust enforcement team who will cite into our community court every single person committing that crime. And the barrier, I guess, was to train the force into regarding the process, right? Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen the first time. We're not going to fix everything the first time for this human. It's going to take time. And so just because you cited him last week and you see him doing the exact same thing this week doesn't mean all bets are off and everything failed. It means
it's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress, and it does take time. And sometimes it'll take 10 times, 20 times, 5 times, 2 times. I don't know how long it's going to take. And timing is everything. We don't know when that window of opportunity is going to open for this person. That window is short-lived, right? It closes very quickly, sometimes in an hour, sometimes in a day, sometimes in seconds when I have this person before me. We don't know when that's going to happen. So now they understand that when they see this person again, they got to get them right back into community court. They got to cite them right again into community court so that we can continue engaging that individual and meet that opportunity when it comes. That was one of the barriers. The other barrier is this: providers have limitations, right? Staffing is one of their big limitations, especially post-COVID, right? Turnover is high, attrition is high. And so when they are understaffed, what are they going to do? They're going to stop staffing community court. And that is the death knell of community court. When we stop having providers, we don't have a community court. There's no such thing. And so it's constant engagement with providers. How can we get you more engaged? How can we get you delivering more services? How can we get you to community court on a regular basis within that structure? Those are some of the barriers that we find difficulty with. The other barrier is this: just because someone cited into community court doesn't mean they're going to show up.
Right.
So, the FTA rate in traditional court is relatively high, medium, I don't know where it is, but I'll tell you, with this population that we're dealing with at community court, the FTA rate, even in traditional court, was high, and it's also high in community court. And so the FTA, by the way, FTA means failure to appear for those who don't know that. So the failure to appear rate in Reno community court is also very high, and we have to continue to find creative solutions to getting those individuals to court instead of just arresting them and getting them in jail. That's not the best solution. And so we're continuing to fight that fight.
Looking ahead, what do you have any future goals for community court in Reno?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. We want to take a more approach of more delivery of on-site services, including on-site therapy. Mm-hmm. services, where we work out of the library. There are actually pods or rooms in that library where we can have delivery of services right then and there. So delivery of therapeutic services, delivery of group therapy services. We do already have a treatment readiness program group setting, but we want to do more of that. We want to present people with opportunities of learning at community court. So right now we'll have Grant Denton from Karma Box who comes in, and he'll provide a presentation for about an hour to those who've come to community court. I want part of community court to have a mindfulness component. So if those who are waiting for their cases to talk to their attorney, talk to the prosecutor, whatever that is, I want someone to come and deliver that to those who are waiting for community court. I want access to ASAM, to the substance use evaluations at community court. There's still a level of triage, right? There's still a level of okay, we're going to set you up for this appointment on this date. We structure around that, but I want to try to remove that time gap as much as possible. Instead of we're going to do your substance use evaluation next Wednesday, we're going to do your substance use evaluation right now. Right. That's what I want, is immediate on-site delivery of services when we have that person in front of us, because sometimes they don't come again and we've lost access to that person. So that's what we're trying to innovate around.
I think that's a great idea. So yeah, when you have the opportunity, you're ready to seize it right then and there.
Precisely.
So as the presiding judge of community court, how has your experience been with it, and how has it influenced your perspective, I guess?
It's fantastic. I'll tell you, I was a prosecutor since 2009 in the Reno City Attorney's Office. So I was part of the old system, right? I played a role in that. I was the prosecutor saying, I don't know, Judge, I don't know what to do. 10 days jail, 5 days jail, time served, whatever you all want. We would try to innovate, but it wasn't enough. Community court is a solution away from that traditional approach, and I accept it fully. We are taking an approach where the criminal justice system gets to act as the placeholder for what is ultimately a social services issue, right? Mm-hmm. People are struggling, they're suffering, but they're struggling and suffering with social issues, substance use, mental health issues, access to things that they can't access. We're a criminal justice system, right? Criminal justice systems are typically reactive. We're punitive in nature often. And so we get to marry these concepts in a way that provides these services. And that is everything. 1989 over in Florida, they started this whole idea of treatment courts, right, in the drug court, and it grew from there. And now we have all these various therapeutic courts and problem-solving courts like community court. That's what needs to happen, and we need to continue to innovate, right? This isn't done. This is just one feature in Reno, but we need to continue to innovate around what we need to do to move the trajectory of these issues and use the court as a way to meet the problem of the day. So I've loved presiding over community court. It's where my heart is. Nice. I've always had an affinity for this population, even when I was a prosecutor, because all I see is people struggling, right, and people suffering. And I also see, but they don't need to. And if there's a way that we can help that person end that suffering and meet a vision that we might have for them that they might not have for themselves yet, we'll hold that vision for a bit, then we've accomplished something. And that's how I see my role in community court.
So on that token, for other jurisdictions considering a similar court, would you have any advice for them or guidance?
Build a coalition of stakeholders, because that's what's going to allow you to do this and allow you to do this in an innovative fashion, right? Everybody has to have a part in this conversation. And that's what we did when we started. And this was Judge Riggs who really took the helm, and our court administrator, Veronica Lopez, who at that time was responsible for helping community court stand on its feet. And so what did they do? They reached out to every single stakeholder in this. They reached out to the police. They reached out to the casinos and said, hey, this is our concept. This is our idea. And this is how we think it's going to help. So reach out to everyone and constantly reach out and constantly talk about community court. It has to be on everyone's mind about what we're doing, how we're innovating, and what we're the successes that we're actually having, because people need to know that. Mm-hmm. The first question people ask me is it successful? And I say yes, and let me tell you how it's successful. And that is a constant project when it comes to community court. Start early with all of your stakeholders, build that agreement with what you're doing with your stakeholders, and then start implementing how you want to meet the issue of the day with the assistance of community court. And I'll tell you, They have one in Las Vegas, and it looks different than ours. And they're doing a fabulous job in Las Vegas. But it looks different than ours because they have different access to services over there that we don't. And we have different access to services that they don't, right? So theirs is going to look different than ours. So just because we have ours doesn't mean you need to model it after us. In fact, I would recommend looking at all of the community courts around the country, especially in similar sized localities, and see how they did it and what they do, what they've done that works and what they have done that doesn't work. And I would start out that way as well.
Well, Judge, thank you very much for joining me. This discussion has been it's been awesome. I've learned a lot. As someone who lives in the Reno Sparks area, it's amazing to hear the resources that are being provided to our unhoused populations primarily. So is there anything else you want to share before we close off this discussion?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me, Seth. I really appreciate the opportunity. And like I just said, I'll take any opportunity I can to discuss community court with anyone who wants to listen. And I'm thrilled that we have created our community court. I'm glad it was created by Judge Riggs in 2019. And I'm glad I made it my mission in 2021 after I was appointed judge to relaunch and re-innovate around community court in 2021. We're not going to stop. It has become a feature in Reno, and it will continue to be that feature in Reno, and we're just going to keep on growing it to see what we can do to help those out who are struggling in our community.
So actually, one more question.
Yes, please.
Community court plays a very important role in the community. So is there something just your average citizen, your average person can do to support community court and its mission?
Yeah, we've thought about this and how this is going to work, and we don't know how it's going to work yet. What we want to do are things like have a community court garden space, have a community court, something that we can provide services and something to show what we've done, right? For individuals who want to take that approach of, well, I'm not ready to do services yet. I'm not ready to treat my substance use issue yet. But I want to engage in some fashion. Well, we want some sort of garden space or something of that nature that would have a therapeutic component to it, so that we can, instead of just the typical milieu of community service and go pick up trash, we want to have individuals engage in a setting where they can look back at something, feel proud of what they've done, and that has its own therapeutic benefit. And so community members might be able to assist in that regard. And we're not sure how that is yet. We do have some community members actually volunteer at community court. One in particular helps guide people who are coming to the library over to various service providers, grab their lunch. And so we're still figuring out what people in the community can do for community court, given the barriers, given the limitations. And I'm not sure exactly, unfortunately, how several members of the community can help. On an individual basis, we'll say, yeah, that you can help in this particular way. But as a formalized, here's what we have, here's a volunteer group, we don't have that set up yet, but we're always thinking, and that's kind of one of our projects we have coming up for next year.
Awesome. Well, once again, thanks for joining us. A great discussion and very valuable information for the audience. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me, Seth. I really appreciate this.
A heartfelt appreciation to our guest and to everyone who's tuned into this episode. Before we wrap up, here are a couple of quick important reminders. For continuing legal education credit, be sure to complete a certificate of attendance and email it to jepodcast@nvcourts.nv.gov. If you have any questions, topic suggestions, or comments, we welcome your input. Please email them to jepodcast@nvcourts.nv.gov. We value and look forward to hearing from our listeners. Stay tuned for more episodes of I'll Allow It Nevada, released bi-monthly. This is Seth Easley signing off. Take care, Nevada.